Hello, everyone. Jacquie Edwards here. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, we've got a great topic. I get loads of questions on this, and it has to do with rent to rent and mortgages. So, I want to cover how I see rent to rent working with mortgages. Now, take this as you will. I am not a mortgage broker. I am not a solicitor. I'm not your legal advisor. I do not give financial advice. This is just personally how I've viewed mortgages in in line with my rent to rent business and how I've built my rent to rent business. So you may see things differently. You may want to build your business differently, and that is totally okay and totally fine. Hello, Paul. So how I see rent to rent and mortgages. Now, it is, so first of all, let's take a step back. So rent to rent is legal in the UK. There are different types of contracts that you can use with your property owner. And how those contracts are worded will basically say if you are subletting or if you are just managing the property for the owner. Now, that is basically the two key differences between the contracts. Hello, Nancy. Again, whether you are managing the property for the owner or whether you are subletting. Now, there are lots of people that are like, subletting is illegal, don't do it. Subletting is not illegal. There are no laws against subletting. The only thing that will say you can't sublet is a contract that the owner already has in place on that property, whether that's a mortgage or a head lease on a leasehold flat or anything else that he has already contracted to as part of his property. That will, a mortgage often has a clause that says no subletting is allowed. Many kind of leasehold agreements will have a clause possibly that says no subletting is allowed. So that's the only thing that makes subletting illegal. How you get around that then is you use the management agreement, which is not subletting. You are managing the property on behalf of the owner, just like every single letting agent across the country does. So yes, those are kind of the two big things to think about right there. So when lots of people are like, oh my God, you absolutely cannot do rent to rent, it's totally illegal, breaks every mortgage condition, that's the first thing to think about is most mortgages will, yes, have a clause that says no subletting is allowed. So in that situation, do not use the commercial lease agreements. Make sure you use an agreement that is a management agreement, which basically says you are managing the property on behalf of the owner. You are acting as their agent. You are then not subletting, and everything is okay on that side. The other thing to think about with mortgages is that there are many different types of mortgages. Now, I usually go and have my basic thought is the owner's responsibility is his mortgage. So I would never read a mortgage contract because I am not a mortgage broker and I don't want that landlord to ever think I've given him any kind of mortgage advice. Because unless you're a mortgage broker, it's a regulated activity. If you're not a mortgage broker, do not get anywhere near offering anybody mortgage advice. And my thoughts are if I read his mortgage, and even if he just gave me a copy and I didn't read it, and I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's fine. We went ahead. It turns out it wasn't fine. Everything goes wrong. He can then sue me, and I'm in awfully big trouble. So I would never read a property owner's mortgage. So I would suggest, unless you're a mortgage broker, you probably don't want to anyways, either. So where does that leave you? Now, for me and my business, most of my properties were already licensed HMOs when I took them over. So for me, that gave me the comfort that I knew the landlord already had the right kind of mortgage in place and the right kind of insurance and all kinds of other things. So I didn't have to worry as much about mortgages. And that's one of the reasons I really love, if you're going for the HMO strategy, to take over a property that's already an HMO. Then you are a step ahead. You know that that owner's already got kind of most of the processes in place. If you are not doing that, the things to really be careful of are if that property owner was already living in that property and has just decided to rent it out. So he will likely have a residential mortgage. Personally, I wouldn't do a rent to rent with a residential mortgage unless that owner has absolutely guaranteed me he's got permission from his mortgage company. And then I might be comfortable doing it. But a residential mortgage is generally going to be very angry if you're renting out the property. And I see that as a bit more high risk. It is totally possible that the owner can talk to his mortgage company and get consent to let and get consent to do whatever you want to do with it. And again, that's the owner's responsibility. And how I cover this being the owner's responsibility is I have a clause in my contract with the owner. No matter what type of contract I'm using, you can pop a clause in there that basically says, you, Mr. Owner, are acknowledging that you are responsible for your mortgage and your insurance and that you've made sure everything is okay. So then I feel like as long as I've told him, here's exactly what I'm doing with the property. Yes, I'm turning it into an HMO, or yes, I'm turning it into service accommodation. As long as he signed that contract with that clause in it, then anything that comes up after that, that's his problem. He should have checked with his mortgage and we can go from there. Again, if you don't feel that way, that's up to you. So residential mortgages, if the property owner was living in that property before he gave it to me, I'd be a bit more wary. And I probably would talk to that owner about making sure they've got the right kind of mortgage in place. Has he checked with his mortgage company and make sure he's confirmed that it's all okay? If the property has already been rented out, but maybe not as an HMO, or if you're doing service accommodation, not as SA, then he's probably got a buy-to-let mortgage, which again, that's a bit better than just your residential mortgage, but many buy-to-let mortgages aren't automatically for HMOs, especially if you're renting them out by the room. And I'm assuming they're probably not for SA either. So again, I'd have that clause in my contract that says, you know, you, Mr. Owner, are confirming that you're happy with everything and that you checked with your mortgage company and everything is okay. So I basically push that responsibility back to the owner. It is, after all, their responsibility. It's their contract that they've got with their mortgage company. So they are responsible for making sure that they understand if everything's okay and that they've checked all the terms and conditions. It is not my responsibility. So as long as I've told them, here's what I'm doing with the property, I am renting it out on a room by room basis, I'm putting locks on the doors, or I'm renting it out as short-term accommodation. There will be, you know, not leasehold, but licensed tenants in the property. They'll be staying short-term. They won't be on ASTs. They're going to have less than that minimum kind of 6-month period in the property. As long as you've told them that, then you've pretty much covered yourself. Then it's up to them to make sure everything's all right. Then what happens if it turns out it wasn't all right? So I actually had this experience. So like I said, our properties were already HMOs when we took them on. So as part of that HMO licensing process, the council takes the information down of who is the mortgage holder, and they are supposed to be sending letters to that mortgage company just to confirm everything's okay. So you'd think everything was okay. These properties had been licensed HMOs for at least 3 years by the time I took them over, right? And in Oxford, they renew licenses every single year. So every single year, the owner had to apply for a license on the property, tell them that there was a mortgage, and get everything okay. So theoretically, the council should have been sending that letter. Everything should have been fine. Well, the year I took over apparently was the first year Oxford City Council actually sent those letters to mortgage holders, because 2 of my properties came back that year. And the owners called me and said that their mortgage company had sent them a letter and basically said, hey, we see you've got this HMO license. You know, it's for 6 people. We're not happy with 6 people. We're only happy with 5 people. So in both of those situations, I mean, it wasn't like this huge panic emergency. The whole world didn't fall apart. The company, you know, the mortgage didn't immediately come and repossess. It wasn't like, oh my God, the world is falling in. They basically just sent a letter saying, hey, we're just checking what's going on. I had a chat with the property owners. We dropped down to 6 people, which basically means there's a room empty in each of these houses, renegotiated the rent and went on from there. Everything was happy, changed the license down to 5 people. Everybody was happy, good to go. So if they're normally, again, I'm not a mortgage broker, I'm not a financial advisor, but normally if you've breached the mortgage terms, or if the owner has breached the mortgage terms in some way, the mortgage company will start that with a letter. And, you know, they'll follow it up with a couple of letters before it's like repossession time and everything goes wrong. So the key thing, I think, is making sure that you trust your property owner. So I don't do rent to rent with property owners that I don't trust. So you are building a relationship with this person. You're basically getting into a joint venture for the next 3 to 5 years with this property owner. I would not deal with somebody that was in financial distress. And I would make sure that it's somebody that I want to work with for the next 5 years, that I trust, so that if something does come up, like the mortgage company sending them a letter saying, hey, we're not sure what's going on here, they would come to me with that and we could work on a solution together. It's not going to be something that they just brush under the, under the sofa, and they never look at it again until all of a sudden the repossession letter comes. They've sent a letter to all the tenants in the house saying, we're repossessing, you've got to move out. So we'd always catch it before that phase, because that's how I work with my landlords. That's how I make sure that we're in a good relationship. Hopefully that has made sense and kind of given you a little bit of thought and confidence around what you're doing with mortgages. Again, my thoughts are the mortgage is the owner's responsibility. That is his contract. I make sure that they've confirmed in the contract that they've checked with their mortgage company and everything's okay. I do not read any mortgage contracts because I'm not a mortgage broker, and I don't want to be seen as giving mortgage or financial advice to my property owners. And yeah, make sure you're in communication with those property owners so that if anything does happen and comes up, then you are in a position to talk through it together and see how you can resolve that issue. Hopefully that makes sense, gives you a little bit of comfort, because I know there's lots of people out there that are very anti-rent to rent, and they say you can't do rent to rent. Rent to rent breaks every single mortgage clause and every single mortgage condition, and it's just absolutely ridiculous, and you can never do rent to rent. So it is possible. It is possible to do it properly and legally within the terms of a mortgage, and you just have to make sure that you understand that situation, and that you have a good relationship with your property owner, and that you trust them, that they've done their due diligence on their side, and that you've used the right contract for their situation. Management agreement if they have a mortgage, commercial lease agreement if they don't have a mortgage. Jackie said, just out of interest, do you currently offer mentorship or classes? I do. Check out my website, renttorentacademy.co.uk, and you can see everything I've got available there. Good plug. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you guys very much for joining me. That was pretty much what I wanted to say on rent to rent here. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments below and I'll come back and check them out. If you've liked this video, make sure you click like, share it with your friends, and I will see you again. Oh, good morning from the UP. That's my Auntie Tina. Hello, Tina. All right, have a wonderful day, and I will see you again next week.